Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red. People want to focus so much on the last 6 years, and I totally get it. We have done the Redcast since April of 2017. Our first show is 3 months after our last bowl game. We are well aware of the last 6 years and what the last 6 years have meant in terms of losses, in terms of not going to bowl games. We're well aware. Yeah. And yet, it's amazing to me. I'll have really smart analytical people come up and want to talk to me. You know, I'm just too emotional about things. But it's amazing how short-minded 6 seasons is in the grand scheme of things. Okay. You know, as I bring up this stat here, and I want to thank the good folks at Arbitrary Analytics have been helping me out with some stats here. I'm going to take this little
great name.
Yeah, I'm going to take this little graphic off.
Hey, I'm just going to chat them through this. I'm going to go reach some refreshments.
Oh yeah, go get.
But I can hear you.
Well, yeah, you just listen.
Fantastic.
You listen to me.
You go. This is honky
time. So basically, you know, it's the last 6 seasons. Okay. We've done some losses, but let's look what happened over the last 60 years. So 6 seasons is 1/10 of that. 10% of the last 60 years. College football programs with 500 plus wins. Nebraska's sitting right there 4th. So we have this graphic up there for people listening later. Alabama's had 591 wins since 1962. Ohio State's had 570. Oklahoma's at 557. Nebraska's at 551. You go all the way down to 532 is Georgia. Now, we understand what trend lines are and the way that we've been winning and the way Georgia's been winning. If things don't change for us, Georgia could catch up with us in just a couple of seasons. And that is a problem, and that's what the last 6 years are. We are not denying at any point what the last 6 years have been. But from a macro level, the last 60 seasons of Nebraska football, there's a lot of seasons to go off of that would show that Nebraska, you know, in our rightful place where we should be is right up there winning the 9-10 games a season. Now, someone will sit there and say, well, but that's going back. You got to go back further than 6 years. You got to go back to the Osborne era. Well, I would look at even the 19 seasons prior to that.
Exactly that, yeah.
Okay, I mean, again, we're talking about this isn't a small sample size. 19 years of post-Osborne football.
Okay,
we went through multiple coaching staffs during this time, yes. and we had, you know, all kinds of you know, poor decisions, I would say, made during this time period, and still during a 19-year period, you'll see us at number 15 there as the 15th winningest program from 1998 to 2016.
Seems all right.
Okay, that was 5 years into the Big Ten,
and that's all of college football.
That's all of college football.
That's at least all Power 5 or even non-Power
5. Boise State's number 1.
So 15.
Yeah.
Despite what we would probably call
we thought that
not the greatest stretch ever.
This freeze frame graphic here in time, we were the 15th winningest program in the prior 19 years. That's what when we got the Redcast together.
Okay.
That's fresh in our mind at that time.
Okay.
And we would have told you, anybody on day one, we would have said, wow, we are getting off of this has been 19 rough years since Osborne was in charge. Well, that was with the 15th winningest program, 167 wins.
167 wins from 98 to 2016. And that's good for 15th in all of college football
nationally.
So you know what that says to me? Blue blood. Well, I mean, even in some of the worst trenches, and I know the next 6 years are significantly worse.
Yep, terrible. We know. Look, we aren't sugarcoating what the last 6 years were.
No, but perspective's important too.
I think that's what this is about. Is that so much focus,
perspective,
and it's
perspective.
It gets back to the graphic of recency bias, especially in this world of this Twitter world that we're in right now. There's so much focus on the last 6 seasons.
For sure.
Nebraska can't get back to this because you haven't beaten this team in 6 years or 7 years or 8 years. Nebraska hasn't done this in 6 years. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I get it. It's been 6 years.
Sure.
It has. And, you know, one of the things that has to happen is you have to hire the right person to get you out of that.
And not just the right person. You're right. But it is never just one person. It's several people, and the leadership is important.
Oh, gosh.
So start it where it should start.
It's this alignment. This gets into, I think, expectations of next season is that to get out of this, you got to hire the right person.
Correct.
We think we did that.
Yep.
We hope we did that. But when I look at some other examples here, now I'm going to use history as an example.
That's a good idea.
Alabama, 2007, Nick Saban.
He's good.
He comes in there after a number of seasons of where they've had losing seasons. They've gone through coaches. They had the Mike Price disaster, all that.
And I think it's important to stress this too. Alabama, though a good team at that time, even prior to Saban's hire. Like they were a blue blood program. They were not the Alabama of today where everyone expects them to be in the national championship game every year. That's not how Alabama was rolling. They were a very good team. They put up very respectable scores and records, but they weren't the team that you thought was going to be in the national championship every year. That was not Alabama. They were a good program. So I'm just saying things can change so quickly. And what does it take? The right coach.
It takes the right coach. And you say it can change quickly. 2007, Nick Saban's hired there. They go 7-6 in their first season. They beat Colorado in the bowl game, but they go 6-6, and they end the season losing to Louisiana Monroe. They won a couple of games against, I think, Ole Miss and Arkansas and maybe Tennessee they beat. So they won a couple of decent games. Picture us this year beating Minnesota and Colorado.
I already have.
But then, the potential of losing to a Louisiana Tech or something. Alabama in year one of Nick Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe in that bye week game. You essentially get the SEC gives them, late in the season. They lost that game. But by year two, they're 12-2. You go to 1999, go to Bob Stoops at Oklahoma. And this is coming off of 4 straight losing seasons and really a bad decade by Oklahoma standards. And he starts off right away in year one, 1999. They go 7-5. And you get some things going, and by year two, they're 13-0. They win the national championship. Go to 2001. Look at Pete Carroll at USC. To put things in perspective, in 2001, when Pete Carroll got to USC, and everyone looks at USC and goes, well, they're in LA. You have all the California talent to recruit, all that good stuff. Go back and look at their records. They had one double-digit winning season between 1980 and 2001. One.
Wow. Say that one more time.
One double-digit winning season.
Okay.
They had a 10-win season in like 88 or 89.
I think Mike Riley was there at that time.
USC?
At USC. He was assistant coach.
Oh, assistant. Okay.
With Cooper? Was it Cooper when they had that?
It would have been 88, 89. I don't know if that's Robinson. I'm not sure.
Maybe Robinson. I think whatever. Not Cooper.
But the point is, that's what USC was going through.
Yeah.
They're a blue blood of football. Yeah. And Pete Carroll in year one, 2001, goes 6-6 there. Now going into 2002, maybe there's some real smart analytic guy out there that would have said, yeah, I knew that Pete Carroll was going to get turned around, but I don't know that anybody in their right mind in 2002 knew that Pete Carroll was going to take USC to 11-2 in year two.
No.
And what this tells me is a couple of things. You and I have talked about expectations, and we've talked about ceilings and floors, and we'll never put a ceiling on this program. I will never sit there and say Nebraska
can't. This is your ceiling? This is ours.
I will never say Nebraska can't win X number of games next year.
Nope.
Okay. The I don't know, the pragmatist to me or whatever, I would look at things next year and go, I'm looking at Nick Saban year one going 7-6. I'm looking at Bob Stoops going 7-5 in year one. I'm looking at Pete Carroll going 6-6 in year one. And I would look at that and go, that seems a reasonable number to think, especially for us coming off of the 4-win seasons and everything, is that, a 6 or 7 win season definitely should not be looked upon negatively by any light.
I agree.
And I think you can see all kinds of levels of progress in that process. But what it also tells me is when I look at that second year, I don't know that we'll go 13-0 in year two like Bob Stoops did, but the 11-2s and 12-2s that Nick Saban and Pete Carroll did, if Matt Rhule is as good of a coach as we think he is, he's demonstrated this at other programs where he took them over in worse situations than we were, and took them to year 3 in their cases. If we're talking about year 2, this should not be a long runway. This isn't a 7-year runway that we heard about back in 2017 and 18. This should be get things right, do things right, and we can get this thing going.
If they do as well, if they get, I would say anything beyond 7 wins this year is pretty damn good. I really would say that. I'm like,
historically, I would agree with you.
And like, that's not to say that I wouldn't be disappointed with the loss here or loss there. That's probably true because I'll tell you this: if we get to 7 wins, my imagination starts rolling. Like, we could have done this, we could have done that. Probably we didn't. If we get to 7 wins, probably we didn't play very well in some games because that would have kept us from 9 wins. Because that's what I think the level of talent on this team is. I guess is what I'm trying to say. And if that's the case, then no small amount of credit should go to Scott Frost and the staff before this, if we're going to kind of bring it back. But I know the transfer portal is going to make a big impact on that. If you're talking your starting quarterback, hell, even the running back Grant's a transfer, and there's, the guys on the defense that might make a difference are transfer guys too, but still it's going to be the core of the people that Frost and that group had recruited to, which I already think are a decent group of players. I already think they're good guys. I already, and I know you would agree with me, think that they have been in more, well, they have been in more games than almost any other program in history and still lost those games. So if coaching changes that fact a little bit, if being very good about situational football and building this team vibe up while doing like this Junction Boys thing about like just
going to Selleck and everything,
then it's not going to be terribly a very big surprise to me if we win more than 7 games. No, but it's a hard thing because of recency bias. It's a hard thing to try to sell to somebody. But I don't think it's that big of a stretch of an imagination to do it, because we're dealing with a coach that has no history here. His history is, and I'm not counting the NFL. I don't give a shit about the NFL when it comes to this. His history is, he understands college football. And like, you can tell just by how he's been handling these camps and getting into Texas and the NIL, like you can tell this isn't a guy who, some people are so stubborn in their ways. Some are so set in their ways. They're so confident in their ability to do one thing that they aren't able to adapt to new things. Rhule isn't cut from that cloth.
No.
Rhule looks at what are my options? What are my tools? What can I use to my advantage? And I will find the right people. I will get the right people in position to maximize.
And what you're saying,
what Nebraska is, what? A developmental program. Right. That's what we're built to do.
And what you're saying are traits of coaches that I would say Pete Carroll's very similar to that. I'd say Bob Stoops is very similar to that. I'd say Nick Saban, very similar to that. They're gonna do it their own way. They're gonna plug and play. Jim in Minnesota here talks about, Pete Carroll hired a 24-year-old tight end coach, Lane Kiffin.
I've heard of him.
Sounds interesting, right? That's what Pete Carroll did in year 1, hired a young coach. Heard of that before. He also inherited a talented but maligned quarterback, Carson Palmer.
But the maligned part is very on point, Jim, because I remember Carson Palmer as a recruit, and he was a big-time recruit. But when he had got there, he was already kind of considered to be a bust. So that is a great point.
And one of the things that's different between all the 3 previously mentioned coaches that I've been talking about here, Stoops and Saban and Carroll, one of the things that they didn't have at their an option at that time was the portal and NIL.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the option for Rhule to be able to go out there and rebuild a roster even faster. I mean, our starting quarterback's going to be, it could have been a quarterback coming back. It could have been Thompson, but he was able to go into this portal that didn't exist back then. And that's where our starting quarterback's going to come out now.
It's hard to know how much that's going to be a benefit to him or not, because there are other teams are also now.
Yeah, everyone gets to do it.
Look at Iowa.
Sure.
They got Michigan's backup quarterback, and now they're slotted to win the West because of that.
Sure.
Clearly because of that. Because if they didn't have him, no one would be talking about Iowa in that vein.
Yeah, they brought in a couple other guys too. I think a tight end receiver. But.
But they always have tight ends, and they always have some. But like, if you don't have that quarterback, right. So my point is, like, other teams have access to that as well. But it's not so much that who you got. It's more about how are you utilizing the tool. And I feel like we are utilizing the tool properly. I think we might. I heard Sip and Callahan talking about preseason magazines, and they were talking about preseason all conference players. I mean, I think Michigan has like 6 on offense. We have nobody. And then like we have our highest guy is like second team with Quentin Newsom at cornerback, and then we got a couple third teamers and everything. So like, just on paper out of the gate, we look like a lesser talented team. But how different is that if we start performing in like
how surprised are you if Thomas Fidone has this breakout season?
Are you telling me Jeff Sims doesn't have all conference
ability or an Anthony Grant at running back or whatever? I mean, you can start going down
your bets.
or any one of the number of offensive linemen that we've already been talking about in the past. Prohaska stays healthy for a year. Ben Hart plays up to that.
Chief Borders, is he okay? Is he better than we thought? So or
Corcoran was a top
do we get like a defensive freshman player of the year with one of those defensive
Princewell or one of those guys?
So Leonard, Cameron Leonard.
Yeah, Leonard.
I feel like that's a guy's name I'm going to have to learn, because I think I don't know. Well, I don't. That's too early for predictions about that, but. That will be the difference maker. Like, yes, Michigan, and rightfully so, has more first team everybody's, but that's because they won. If we won more games, then our players we looked at as better players. Sure. So all we have to do is win. It's just kind of this thing that's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? What comes first, the better players or the better development or the better record? It's like, it's in college football, it's such a blend. If you're doing right by the guys, maybe you cultivate an All-American or All Big Ten player, and that brings in more guys. It's not super complicated. It's just a little what's the right word for it? It's all about the processes. It's all about the culture, and it's all about having coaches that know what they're doing. Like Harbaugh 3 years ago was looked at as a buffoon. He was. People hate him. Like, he's on the hot seat. He was on the hot seat the exact same time Scott Frost was on the hot seat for the first time.
Yep.
But actually, he was on the hot seat the year before Frost got hired.
Yeah, because he was there. He got there earlier than Frost.
But what did Michigan do? To their credit, they held on to a guy that actually figured out how to figure some stuff out.
And he made some changes. One of the things he did, they got under center more.
Yeah.
They doubled down on playing a different style, more physical style of football to compete against Ohio State, where they felt like they couldn't just man for man always recruit. Even Michigan couldn't quite recruit at the level of Ohio State if they were just going to try to go man for man, position for position. And
maybe not quite.
They wanted to have a schematic advantage on them, and they got under center. They have played physical against Ohio State the way that his Stanford teams played physical against Oregon back in the day, and did things that I remember Scott Frost at one of those coaches clinics, the first ones we went to, where when he talked about he wanted to build Oregon speed and Husker power, he specifically referenced Stanford back in the day, where he's like, we were great at Stanford or at Oregon. We did all these things. We could score 100 points on everybody, except once a year we would play Stanford and they'd hit us in the mouth, and we couldn't do this or that. And when I took over my own program, I knew I wanted to be able to beat a team that could take on that Stanford, but also go and score 100 points the way that Oregon did. And obviously, you got little pieces of both, but none of it ever led to any wins.
But that's a great point with Michigan versus Ohio State, because let's face it, they're the cream of the conference. That's not an indictment. That's just how it is right now.
Yeah,
that's just how it is right now. And you're right. Ohio State was just maybe this much better at recruiting the high end guys than Michigan. But now what Michigan has gotten better doing is taking high end guys that they're recruiting that maybe this much lower, but they've had them for 3 more years.
Yeah.
Or 1 more year. And that 1 more year can equate into really knowing situational football again and being able to take advantage of close game situations and beating them. Right now, they're the cream of the conference. And that was such a slow takeover that it almost was like a magic trick how he did it.
They won Ohio. This goes back again to the recency bias. And hey, we've lost, the last 6 seasons. We know what that was. Michigan lost, I think, 16 out of 17 times to Ohio State.
It's a large stretch.
I think it was 16 out of 17 times. Somebody can I'm sure, fact check me there. But they've won back-to-back now. Yeah. And not just back-to-back. They've done it, again, the physical style play.
That's the whole thing, too. It's not like the Scott – okay, if Scott Frost was going to be very successful in the Big Ten, it was going to be because of his magical offensive powers, Like, Michigan isn't doing anything fancy. They're just grinding you out, and they're beating you down, and their players are good enough, not maybe upper echelon, but they have 6 first-team
Let's use Iowa as our example right now. So Iowa's our Ohio State, and we went out there and we beat them last year, and we did.
Yep.
But one of the reasons we beat them was that Trey Palmer had a classic day, and we threw a couple deep bombs on him and everything. Okay, that's great. I'm glad I'll take the win every time we can take it. For us to beat, if we're going to beat Iowa this year, if we're kind of progressing, I want to see us beat them a different way. I'd love to see us get under center. I'd love to see us physically beat this team. Well, I'd love to see us beat Wisconsin that way
as a program.
Program,
yeah,
like
that looks better. I'll take the win anyway.
I'll take the win anyway.
But I know exactly what you're talking about.
To me, a more consistent thing is I don't know that every time we play Iowa, we're going to throw the ball 80-yard passes on them.
It's a better indication of future success for the program if we beat them in a very almost I don't want to say Big Ten way, a Nebraska way. When people say, like Nebraska's getting back into Big Ten football this year, how, Satterfield and Rhule have talked about winning in cold weather and all this, and that's Big Ten football. That's Nebraska football. Well, I know
that should be that's Nebraska football first and foremost. I'm glad it works in the Big Ten, but that's Nebraska football. We need to get back to Nebraska football.
We do, but I feel like
and the Big Ten can pull that out of us. That's a positive about the Big Ten. I'm not crapping on the Big Ten here. I'm just saying the Nebraska is going to be at its best when Nebraska plays Nebraska style
because
football.
what will be irritating is, well, Nebraska finally learned how to play Big Ten football, and now they're winning. Like that would be annoying because that's not true. What we have done is got away from who we were, which was more of a Big Ten blueprint. I would agree that our blueprint of success in the past was more suited for what the Big Ten currently is now. But to say that Nebraska's finally playing Big Ten football and that's why we have success will be irritating because as fans, longtime fans, that's what we were clamoring for anyway. I was like, no, run the damn ball, huddle, execute, hit hard on defense, and play fundamental football. Like that's what like we never said stop doing that.
That's all.
It's a fan base. We're like, I really wish we'd just go 3 and out so quickly that the defense was exhausted, and then we scrambled around and didn't play hard at the line of scrimmage and let teams just run the ball down our throat. Like we never said that. That's not what we wanted. It wasn't like, I hope we can get interceptions so quickly that we can get the ball back on offense. That's what Frost thought we needed to do. But like that was never going to happen in this conference. So, but regardless, I guess, if they're going to say it's Big Ten football and Nebraska is finally playing Big Ten, be it. As long as we're winning,
because
fine.
We're sitting at 10-2 and they're having that conversation, then I'm happy with that too.